from The Guardian. EU elections, Macron to dissolve French parliament after crushing loss to far right. What I love about this is that basically the far right are people who are like, we should have checks on immigration. And that's basically it. All of these lefties are coming out saying the issue of immigration is helping the far right win. And it's like, what is the far right promoting? No war, working class jobs, and controlled migration. I'm like, that's not far right. That's like centrist.
The far right is them saying, hey, we shouldn't encourage people to take treacherous journeys and risk their lives to come to a country where we don't have the tax base to support them. They're like, crazy, get out of here.
No, all those issues are blue collar issues, right? But that's the problem when they designate that far right as this, that's the evil. Well, when all those things line up with working class folks, it's just they're losing the battle on defining the far right.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what's most interesting about sort of the rise of an interest in protecting individual nations in Europe, because Europe is, to scale, so much smaller than America. I mean, we are used to all the states having to have the conversations about immigration. But could you imagine if every state set their own immigration policy? That's effectively what Europe has to deal with. And especially with the EU, if the EU rules them in a way that says, like, well, we set the immigration policy and your countries have to deal with it, of course you're going to get people who are saying, well, then you're sort of abusing us and we don't want to put up with this anymore. It seems inevitable to me, but I guess I'm not a progressive from Europe.
The idea that any of this is quote unquote far right is ridiculous. The only reason it's called far right is because the phrase far right has been programmed into people or conditioned into people for them to think. People have been conditioned to think the term far right means just evil, bad. Right? There's no context. It doesn't matter what the policy is. It's far right.
It means bad thing.
Argument over. And this goes to show you, again, this is something that we reiterate on the show all the time. The left doesn't have an argument. The left has emotions. The left doesn't make arguments. They don't try to make arguments.
It's fire.
Yeah. It's my hair's on fire. I'm upset. They're screaming fire in a building, or there's this big thing to be afraid of.
But in this case, they set the fire, and now they're like, you guys want to put out this fire? That's crazy. It's keeping us all warm. Like, what are you talking about?
Fire does not want to be put out. It resists. It expands. I mean, it's mindless expansion of chaos, just spreading and destroying. Let's get a little context here. So this is France's president, Emmanuel Macron, has been accused of gambling with French democracy. Oh, heavens. After announcing that he will dissolve parliament and call snap legislative elections in the wake of his allies' crushing defeat to Marine Le Pen's far-right national rally in Sunday's European Parliament elections. On a night that saw far-right parties make significant but far from conclusive gains in Europe, the RN won about 32% of French votes, more than double the 15 or so scored by Macron's allies, according to projections, with the socialists just behind at about 14%. The first round of elections for the National Assembly will take place on the 30th of June, and the second on the 7th of July. Macron announced in an address to the nation in a huge gamble on his political future 3 years before the end of his second term as president. Now, some people are actually saying it's the honorable move to make, that by doing this, it's actually allowing Marine Le Pen to come in and win political power. I don't see it as a gamble. If they have an election now, Marine Le Pen wins. That's kind of the idea. So I ain't mad at Macron. I'm not an expert on French politics. I also want to stress, too, a lot of people don't seem to understand. So there was an election in the European Parliament, which is basically like Congress. And it's not really the same because Europe, these are very strongly, the people of these countries have their own cultural identities. In the United States, we have states. There's state legislatures and representatives, and then there's the federal level. EU is effectively their version of the federal level Congress, and so they win in France. Macron then says, okay, we're going to have an election here in this country for our single French parliament, which we are expecting now the far right to win. Which is interesting because Marine Le Pen, I'm pretty sure she's she wants out of the EU. She wants, what do they call it? Frexit?
Yeah.
Yep.
French exit. I don't think they'll get it, but it's starting to look like the belt is buckling under the girth of the gluttonous global elite.
Well,
and that's it. There you go.
I mean, look, there was a time when like countries were trying to be more independent, and that all ended, I think, after World War II, right? And now it's like, ever since it's like the UN, and now there's the EU, it's like we're trying to make all these different countries across the world enter into these I don't want to call them pacts, but these organizations that are supranational, right? And essentially, it's my opinion that, like Tim said, it's just, the global elite or the power brokers trying to consolidate as much power as they can. They want to. Most of these organizations, the UN, the EU and stuff, they would like to have the ability to veto any of the individual nations' laws, not their votes in the EU or whatever, but their individual laws in the nations. There are definitely people in the UN that would love to be able to veto, American state laws. But they obviously we have the ability to stop them. But that's the ideal, and that's the goal. And that's part of why you see all of I believe part of the reason why you see all of the ecological stuff. The word is slipping. It's the dumbest thing that I can't find the word.
Green New Deal.
There you go. Thank you very much.
Was that the word?
Yeah. Well, no, it's not the Green New Deal. It's the environmental. There you go.
But I think we're at a breaking point because you see it. I think some say the country's getting too big, right? Eventually, we'll have some sort of breakup.
Are you talking about population?
No, I'm just saying, with one government, right? Like as these different world governments are coming together, I shouldn't say one world government, but you know what I mean? When these NATO groups and, even the hatred for like the World Economic Forum, people, I think normal folks, you get to a point where there's I don't want to say too many people, but you don't want to just have one set of rules, right? When we talk about a national divorce or we talk about like, you get to a point where maybe the guys in New York City and the kids in Alabama that are working a blue-collar job are not going to agree on all the same policies. And I think that's what you're seeing. And if you're a Democrat, or let me just say that the globalist elite type in the U.S., and you look and see these national elections, the trend is coming towards the populism. It's coming towards that.
Are you pro-national divorce?
Yes.
Overall?
Peaceful national divorce, yes.
So okay, no. What I'm saying is that a goal that you have now? And I don't.
No, I just think I think it's inevitable. I do. I think at a certain point we get to that. Now I hope we don't.
I don't think it's possible. Peaceful, not possible.
You might be right.
Even if it's not peaceful in the U.S., I think
Las Vegas ceases to exist overnight in a national divorce. If national divorce is a 25-year process of careful negotiations between corporations and state governments, then perhaps. Call it whatever you want. But if we get any kind of short of like anything less than a decade, and it's going to just be abject chaos.
Yeah, no, I'm not. Once again, I'm not advocating for it. I just think at a certain point the debt gets so high, the like I said, the laws for everybody being one size fits all. Yeah. I just think there's too much pushback.
Well, I agree, but that would be more indicative of when the system comes crashing down, no one's going to be happy with what it looks like. I think, if you look at the fall of the Soviet Union, people you can look to history because history rhymes and then figure out what's coming next. The same thing I would say is true for the EU in a different sense. The EU being relatively young, should this movement we see, and we had another story that we'll pull up in a second with Germany, should this movement result in states, countries breaking away from the EU, they're still in a position to sustain themselves much better. But with Brexit, I think they tried to make Brexit as painful as possible because once they took back control, they were like, let's burn it to the ground, make everyone feel the pain. I think the same thing's true with Biden in Afghanistan. But Europe, it's a lot younger. The United States, man, we're 250 plus years. We're looking at if the dissolve happens, you've got sheer dependencies, and it's going to be worse than the Soviet Union. But what's likely going to happen is there's going to be a regional factory for, I don't know, insert meat processing plant company. And they're going to be like, okay, our state has just broken away from the union. Our headquarters is in a unionist state. They're not calling us and telling us what's going on because we have a regional manager who lives in our state. He's fled. He's not here anymore. So what happens? Who's your boss? Well, a guy shows up with a group of other dudes armed to the teeth, and they say, we want to talk to the boss of this meat processing plant. And he comes down and he's like, look, man, I have no idea what's going on. Like, here's what's going to happen. We're in charge now. You answered us. I'm going to give you my phone number if we even have phones. So here's how you contact me. We're going to make sure the supplies keep coming in and you can keep doing your job because the people of our home, they need food. Okay, I'm the boss now. And they go, you got a boss. And that's how you get oligarchs. One by one, guys with guns just go and start securing different buildings, taking them over. Food's got to come from somewhere. Water got to come from somewhere. Big national, like, A national meat processing plant is not going to dispatch PMCs to Nevada to secure the property. It's just going to break. And then it's going to get real interesting. Las Vegas, y'all are in trouble. People who live in Las Vegas are in deep trouble because if national divorce does come, Vegas doesn't have anything. Nevada does not have anything.
A lot of sand.
And the desert reclamation of Vegas is a product of tourism. Luxuries are not going to exist in a national divorce circumstance. You'll just go hungry. But then, of course, I imagine the people who live in Nevada are going to be hungry and they're going to not want to give up their homes and they're going to want food. So what does that mean? It's going to mean conquest. It's going to mean they're going to go out looking for food and they're going to find it and they're going to take it however they have to. Water, too. California, SoCal, you're in trouble. Colorado River, that water's going sour real quick.
I do think, major American cities, especially like Nevada or maybe even Phoenix to a certain extent, I'm not a geographic expert here, team, but they have benefited from the fact that we encourage interstate commerce and we encourage development that allows people to live where they naturally wouldn't have settled. I think in contrast, Europe, because they are all actually their own countries and have their own economies, it's much easier for them to come to the realization that they could break away. I mean, there are parts of Europe that have different challenges, but for the most part, Americans, businesses, in my opinion, American businesses and American state governments are used to a certain amount of interdependency where that wasn't always the case in Europe.
The story I was told from the Spanish activists was really interesting, how the EU just basically mutilated them. They said, so this is what the activists told me when I was in Spain back in 2012. They said before the EU, the currency was the peseta. And you'd wake up in the morning, you'd go to the local, coffee shop or whatever, you'd grab a newspaper, 1 peseta. You'd cup of coffee, 1 peseta. You'd sit down, you'd eat, you'd drink, you'd read. No big deal. Then overnight, seemingly overnight, they switched to the euro. The only problem is €1 was 3 peseta. You'd walk into the store, newspaper, €1. Coffee, €1. And you're like, that's 3 times increase. So what happens is Germany says, we're going to cut you a big fat loan to normalize your economy so that your people can afford it. Now Spain is in massive debt to Germany, basically. Germany ends up gaining majority control by offering up these loans to these countries that could not handle it. Greece is in crisis. So a lot of people are very upset, and I think the EU is ripe for dissolution, especially if Marine Le Pen wins.
Thanks for watching this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to check out the live show Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. on this channel. Subscribe, and we'll see you all there.